long neck with a very prominent head, and then 3 large black humps. That is what I saw.
The sound of the whale vibrates all the air spaces on your body, so you don't just hear it, you feel it.
The aya is definitely the most distinctive primate in the world, and it looks like it's made up of the spare parts of other animals.
Unravelling the mystery of the whale song and discovering the legend behind a freakish African monkey. Animal X investigates the weird world of animal mysteries. First to the English coast, where for centuries many claim to have seen a strange creature cruising the ocean.
Something is stirring in the Cornish waters off England's southwest coast. This is a mystic and magical place, a land of legend and folklore, where you are never more than 20 miles from the sea. Since the late 19th century, a strange, long-necked beast has been repeatedly sighted on this stormy stretch of the Atlantic.
It was quite frightening. It was just so big and unlike anything I've ever seen in my life.
A long neck with a very prominent head, and then 3 large black humps.
It was graceful, seductive, undignified.
Animal X travels to Falmouth Bay in Cornwall to trace the centuries-old mystery of the great sea monster that haunts its shores, and to ask the countless witnesses who have come face to face with it over the decades, could this be a prehistoric creature? One Sunday morning in 1972, Terry Josie was collecting driftwood on a local beach when he saw something strange a couple of miles out to sea.
I just happened to look up and I saw this peculiar object, like a Viking longship that was just coming out of the mist. It was a long neck and what looked like large rubber tires strung together. That's the only way I can describe it. If you can picture that in your mind, that is what I saw.
In the mid-1970s, Morgawar reared its long neck once again, this time in full view of several different witnesses. At the center of this Morgawar legend revival was self-styled Wizard of the Western World, Tony Doc Shields, who claims he conjured up the beast with magical incantations.
It was interesting, at the same time deeply disturbing, that there was something there that couldn't quite be identified. And I thought, as I was a working wizard, I would conjure it up, and so I did. And I saw the thing in the mouth of the Helford River. I was disturbed by my sighting of it, and at the same time excited that in some way that I'd caused it to be there. A long-necked, humpbacked beast, whatever it is, MORGAWR, the great Cornish sea serpent.
Author Paul Harrison is a sea and lake monster hunter who has investigated countless sightings across the British Isles.
The case of MORGAWR in itself is a wonderful story and dates back to, I think it's the early 19th or 20th century. The sightings dating back certainly over 100, 150 years.
However, he is skeptical about the rash of sightings in the 1970s and questions the reliability of the witnesses and pictures.
And ultimately, when one discusses this with the witness or discusses this with the local journalist or local historian, flaws are found. And ultimately, I believe my own perception of the whole mid-1970s MORGAWR thing, which was the thing that promoted MORGAWR, is nothing but a hoax. The whole thing is a generated hoax.
But despite the skeptics, sightings continue. Yachtsman Terry Holm got a much closer view of the beast one summer evening in 1998 as he crossed the Carrick Roads, a deep natural valley, in his small boat.
What I saw that night was awesome. The size was quite incredible. The top of the head was, I was going to say, twice as big as a dustbin lid. It was black. The flesh was black. It broke surface about 15 to 20 yards in front of my little boat. It was absolutely enormous.
Peering through the window of her cottage beside the peaceful Helford River one morning, Carrie Ham, now in her 90s, spied what she thought was a yacht in trouble.
I got my binoculars and I was having a look at it, sank again, and up came a thing like a big arm shaking something at the end of it. It went. That was all. Quite 15 or 20 feet long, I should think. Sheila Bird found out the name of it. Plesiosaurus.
Cornish writer Sheila Bird believes she, her brother, and several other witnesses saw Plesiosaurus from cliff tops one summer evening in 1985.
Small head, a long neck, one enormous hump, and two muscular areas, one fore and one aft, which when you're lower down could well appear as two small humps. The tail was about as long as the trunk. Now the trunk, I would think, was something like 20 feet long, and it was grey and mottled, and it had its head held high, and it moved in a smooth, swan-like manner. So I consulted some paleontologists after that, and when I started describing this creature, they said, you don't need to say any more than that. We know what you've seen.
So what is this creature? And if it is merely a myth, why have so many people claimed to have seen it? Marine biologist, writer, and broadcaster Kelvin Boot is head of education and information at the National Marine Aquarium in Plymouth. He offers his own theory.
I'm one of these people that since childhood has always wanted sea monsters to exist. So in a sense, I fall on the side of belief, if you like. But my scientific background tells me that these things can't possibly exist. Down in the southwest, we get huge leatherback turtles in excess of 2 meters and growing up to 3 meters in length every single year. They don't have scales like tortoise scales on their shells. They have these longitudinal lines and grooves which look just like an upturned rowing boat. The basking shark is an extremely frequent visitor to us during the summer. It's a species that comes in close to the coast as well, so it's very easy when you've got 2 or 3 of these in a line to get a many-humped sea serpent. So I'm pretty sure that that explains an awful lot of the sightings. The one I have real problems with is the long-necked sea monster, the plesiosaur. I can't explain that.
One day, perhaps, we may discover the real truth about MORGAWR, the sea serpent of Falmouth Bay. But until then, there's bound to be more sightings, and people will continue to believe in their local monster.
From one deep-sea conundrum to another. After the break, Animal X investigates the songs of the humpback whale. What's behind them? Why have some of these gentle giants decided to change their tune?
We can't find any similar examples of a vocal culture changing like this, jumping like this, for any species.
Welcome back to Animal X. How creatures communicate with one another is a timeless mystery. In the case of humpback whales, they do it by singing. So what's the message behind these watery melodies? Why have some decided to change their tune?
It's generally accepted that most animals communicate in their own way. Some people even believe their pets can talk directly to them. But can any of these sounds be described as animal language? Do they actually talk to each other, call each other by name, or even have the slightest ability to influence each other? Could animal communication still be evolving?
I think this does have the potential to change what we think about animal communication in fairly fundamental ways.
Whale song is the most complex sound in the animal kingdom.
Animal X travels to Queensland and later Rottnest Island in Australia to unravel the extraordinary discovery that will change the way we look at how animals may talk. Michael Node studies the whale population on the east coast of Australia. Kurt and Micheline Jenner follow a separate whale population on the west coast. Separated by a massive continent, they come together to make an incredible discovery.
A humpback whale song is an extraordinary natural phenomenon. They're not passing it down genetically, they're actually learning the pattern of the song, and that keeps changing, so that's cultural evolution.
The sound of the whale vibrates all the air spaces in your body, so you don't just hear it, you feel it.
They sing the songs for very serious reasons. They're not mucking around out there. It's only the males that are singing the songs. They're out there, they're advertising themselves.
In the east, Michael Node has been recording the whales that migrate up and down the east coast each year. On the other side of the continent, the Jenners and their family continued their own study of the west coast whales. They were about to make an incredible discovery.
In 1996, we started to notice a very interesting change. All the whales here on the east coast were singing the same song. It was a beautiful, nice, steady song. It was well structured. And then round about August in 1996, completely out of the blue, we noticed one whale that was singing a completely different pattern. We thought perhaps this whale was sick, perhaps it was old, perhaps it had a few too many parasites running around its brain, or so we just thought that this was an unusual whale. When we came back, to our amazement, about a third of the whales were suddenly singing this new song. There'd been a quantum leap between one song and the next. The old song was basically extinct, it had died out completely. After we discovered this tremendous change, we thought, well, maybe this new song had just appeared spontaneously in the population and it had caught on for reasons that we didn't understand. But we thought we'd better check our bases to make sure we're right. So the nearest other population of humpback whales is in Western Australia. But past studies have shown that their songs are quite different to our whales over here.
Our colleague said, well, look, you've got all this song data. I've got a friend who's doing a new song project over on the East Coast. Would you mind if he had a look at some of your song data?
So one day a tape eventually arrived on my desk from Kurt Jenner, and I put the tape on, and it was a thrilling feeling because straight away you could recognise that song was exactly the same as the new song that we had on the East Coast. There was no doubt about it. I guess it's just one of those great moments in science where you just suddenly something connects and you go eureka. I was dumbfounded to begin with. But as soon as I started thinking about it, I got more and more excited because what it meant was that not only had the song jumped across from Western Australia to Eastern Australia, but the East Australian whales, for whatever reason, had suddenly decided that they liked that song better than their own song. And I realised at that moment that what I had was a very exciting discovery.
Michael Node was not alone. Nature, the world's leading scientific journal, eagerly published the findings. Meanwhile, the question was, why had this occurred?
Well, what we think happened was instead of all the West Australian whales heading up the West Australian coast, a few of them migrated across and headed up the East Australian coast. We've got a cultural trait from the West Australian whales, if you like, in a way infecting the East Australian population, and the East Australian whales have all had their vocal culture altered dramatically by this.
Now, what we don't really fully understand is why the song changed so quickly. Why did that animal not pick up the East Coast song himself?
Could that one song have been so seductive that an entire population decided to sing it instead? Could this have been one of nature's greatest love songs ever?
He, for some reason, was probably more sexually attractive to the females in that population over there.
We can't find any similar examples of a vocal culture changing like this, jumping like this, for any species, anywhere. Humpbacks are in a league of their own.
So if the whale song can evolve, is it possible that eventually whales will develop a form of communication similar to ours?
We've had people that study human language write to us and say, what do you think about the comparison between the evolving human language and whale languages?
Whether it could ever evolve into a language will probably never know, because maybe, you know, we probably won't be around another 20 million years when that might have happened.
For now, animal communication remains a mystery, but these animals are still evolving. The door is still open, and who knows what we may be able to understand one day.
From melodic mammals to petrifying primates, after the break, Animal X investigates the eye. Steeped in superstition, could it be our last link with a time past?
People believed that if they saw an eye, they needed to burn down their village and move. A very strong reaction to the evil or the bad.
Welcome back. Steven Spielberg's Gremlins may have been the stuff of fantasy, but on the African island of Madagascar, there lives a real-life gremlin with a fascinating tale all of its own. Its name, the Eye.
The island of Madagascar is home to one of the world's most bizarre creatures. Its appearance is so strange that it has incredible power over the people who inhabit the land.
Some inhabitants still have strong impressions of the eye and still think of it as either good or bad, bringing either good luck or bad luck.
These animals in themselves do not hold power in their own right.
Animal X travels to Madagascar and later to New York to separate fact from fiction in an attempt to understand how this creature has become so central in Malagasy folklore. 160 million years ago, Madagascar was severed from the rest of Africa. Many of the creatures and plants became isolated and only continued to exist on this unique island. One such creature is the Eye. Eleanor Sterling is the director of the Center for Biodiversity and Conservation at the American Museum of Natural History. She has spent a number of years in Madagascar studying the Eye at close quarters.
The eye is definitely the most distinctive primate in the world and one of the most distinctive animals. And it has big ears, bat-like ears, and a long fox-like tail. And it has long, long hair. It's about the size of a large house cat. The front teeth are continuously growing like one would find in rodents. And no other primate has continuously growing front teeth, so that's very distinctive. It has this middle finger that is quite thin. It looks a lot like a probe or a stick. We often say that it looks like it's made up of the spare parts of other animals.
The Eye, although related to other lemurs, is the only animal left in its family. This unique creature is a living fossil, the last remaining link to a time that has passed. Perhaps this helps us understand why it's a creature that is shrouded in mystery and the center of numerous conflicting legends.
Well, we don't know much about the eye because the eye comes out at night. They usually leave their nests just after dusk and then return in the morning before daylight. So we don't interact with them and therefore don't know very much about them. It's difficult for us to put it into an easy category and therefore lends itself easily to legends. The legends over the ayayas can be divided into two different categories, the ayay being bad luck and categories with ayayas being good luck. They're both very strong in the belief systems of the people that live in Madagascar.
Why is it that this unique creature has such a profound effect on the lives of the people of Madagascar? Dr. Alan Schaefer is a clinical psychologist and socioanalyst. He understands how an animal, such as the eye, can take on such significance.
At a national level, a particular object can acquire a great importance. First of all, needs to acknowledge that we're not dealing with rational processes. If a particularly bad event or a bad experience happens simultaneously with the presence of some kind of animal, it becomes associated with an event. And in more primitive times, the understanding of the cause and effect between events that occurred in the world was different. So the better understanding we have, the less we're inclined to make those kinds of attributions to animals. But the animals themselves don't particularly have the power to bring about good or bad luck or good or bad fortune. But nevertheless, they still have the capacity for evoking very primitive feelings.
In some areas in Madagascar in the past, people believed that if they saw an aye, they needed to burn down their village and move. A very strong reaction to the evil or the bad that an aye could bring to their village. Whereas in other areas, people believed that the aye was the embodiment of their ancestral spirits, and ancestor worshipping is a very important part of Malagasy culture. If people find an aye in the forest and they've injured it, they feel like they need to beg forgiveness from the aye. So if the aye dies, for instance, they'll give it the full burial that they would give to a chieftain in their village.
Despite claims that the aye has no supernatural powers, it continues to be both feared and worshipped by the inhabitants of Madagascar.
From an age-old sea serpent, Morgawar, said to haunt the eerie Cornwall coast, to the whale song, a mystifying, changing melody, to the strangest primate of them all, the aye. The mysterious tales of the animal world continue to fascinate and perplex us. After all, it said there are stranger things in heaven and earth than we can think of. You've just seen some of them on Animal X.